Mosquitoes.
Nicole got bitten by a mosquito last night.
No way. Podcast 8.
Podcast 8.
Good to see you again.
As always.
We talked a lot this morning about all the things that we have planned moving forward. Super excited, so thank you for the opportunity in and around that. One of the things we talked about was taking a seasonal perspective on subjects. We have enjoyed starting this podcast, making this podcast. We've enjoyed making events, whether they be gatherings and men's circles or whether they are hikes, with lots of opportunities there. And we've pretty much done that haphazardly, in a good way.
We've been smoke testing, just seeing what we can do, what kind of traction we're going to get on that. But I think we're of an age, and it's spring equinox today, so it feels like as we cross this threshold into a new season, we might spend a bit of time exploring a theme and holding it a little bit closer for a little bit longer.
Sounds like a good idea. So we will spend the next 12 weeks talking in and around one theme, and that may be true of any gatherings that we have, and people can join those. There's one coming up in a couple of weeks' time. It may be true of an event that we put on or a walk that we do, and it's definitely going to be true of the content that we write about, but also that we talk about here on the podcast. So where are we deep diving into, Karl?
Relationships with ourselves, with others, as midlife men. That's our audience. But that might also be within work. That might be with the world at the moment. We're not going to go here now, but fuck me, my relationship with the world and what's happening in the world right now is strained because of what I'm hearing in the news. And I think it's really important we explore some of these big themes.
Yeah, for sure. Just before we sort of deep dive into a particular aspect of that, tell me a little bit about that lived experience of what's going on at the moment and your relationship with it. We've got significant change and ambiguity going on in the world. Tell me what's appearing for you.
I can't look at it for too long. I have to, but I can't look at it for too long. I'm so overwhelmed and so...
Why do you have to?
Well, I don't have to, but part of me wants to keep my just a little fraction of a toe in the smallest part of my smallest toe. I feel I should be keeping it in a little bit, but it's so overwhelming. And I said to my wife this morning, we have, as people living in the world right now, I feel I have very little agency in what's actually happening within the world right now. I don't think I ever had much agency in what's happening in the world right now. But there are some crazy decisions that the ripples of that, the ramifications of that are just so overwhelming. It blows my mind, not in a good way, about how difficult that is to even interpret or make sense of. And it's changing at such a rapid rate. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm bowled away by it.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? There's no such thing as glacial speed anymore. It seems that everything is changing at quite a pace. And yet there are some things changing almost seemingly on a daily basis. Yeah. For example, our relationship with technology and the possibilities of things like AI, but also the potential impact of that. Geopolitics and the ramifications for that, those ripples that we're feeling. We were already in a cost of living crisis, but everything that I've heard is that is going to grow exponentially and very, very quickly as a consequence of the activity in the last 3 weeks in the Middle East. It's possible that many people are experiencing secondary trauma. I don't know an awful lot about it. I was aware of it through the pandemic. That's when I first began to learn about it. It was true for me in the unfolding of what was going on in the Middle East, or the latest chapter of that atrocious situation from any perspective. And us seeing this content and it being far more available and accessible and prevalent. And now we are here, seemingly on the precipice of global change.
I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know which way is up. I don't know which way is down. I don't know what to believe. What is fake news? What is real life? What is deep fake? Like where is this? Where is this narrative? Who should I believe? And what is the truth anymore, and I'm so overwhelmed with it. It's a real struggle.
Yeah, it really, really is. And at the heart of that is relationships. We could also talk about things like our capacity to have and then also take other people's resources, which might be an underlying driver for some of our behaviors. But parking that, there are broken relationships. And we're going to spend the next 3 months talking about relationships particularly. It's true that with every man that we work with and spend time with, they are in relationships, whether they're in a romantic relationship or not. They're definitely within a family unit, whether that's functional or less functional, extended family units, communities, often in work environments. So relationships, absolutely critical. But both you and I sailed into one of them, possibly the most difficult and complex areas of relationships, which is midlife relationships with another partner. Let's talk about that. I mean, you wrote a blog about this, so we'll start by exploring what you were writing about and the themes within that.
Much closer to home, isn't it? Yeah, and this is very particularly the relationship with a female partner. And yeah, my wife is 45, and so for the last 3 years or so, the perimenopause, the phase that she's in at the moment. Can I just note, we're not experts in this by
Absolutely
any stretch
not.
of the imagination. We have lived experience as the partners of someone who's going through the menopause. And I think as midlife men, we can very much push this away. We can ignore it. We can call the other person plenty of unhelpful things. Or we might have another role that we might wish to consider here as well. In writing the blog that I wrote, and we're going to come on to the blog that you wrote about menopause as well, I was hoping to name something that is happening in so many of my friends and colleagues' lives at the moment, but not for us. It's happening around us. It's not happening to us. And it's not about you, Matt. It's not about me as men. This is not a conversation around the misogynistic side of menopause by any stretch of the imagination. It is about honouring an incredible process that happens in the female body, but can easily be targeted through the media, historically, through very negative connotations and associations that are just so unhelpful. The blog post I wrote was about a conversation that my wife and I were having, and it started off, the opening line in my blog is about, well, I'm not going to kill myself. And it's quite strong, it's bringing up quite an emotional response for me at the moment. My wife said that to me. We were discussing what she's going through at the moment, the changes that she's experiencing physically, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, within our family unit, within her work, within her friend groups as well. And I had no idea the severity of struggle that she was facing at certain times in her cycle, in her menstrual cycle. And this conversation came, she was 2 weeks late in her cycle. And that was placing huge amounts of pressure on her. And for her to say that was like the tip of the iceberg. I could not leave that. I couldn't just go, oh, all right, sure. All right, well, thanks for that. And just kind of bury it and just pretend it didn't happen. I wanted to know what that meant. Again, it's not about me. I wanted to know what that meant for Nicole, for my wife. I wanted to understand a little bit more around what the fuck she was going through, because that's really, really heavy, incredibly heavy when your life partner turns around and makes that kind of statement. It says an awful lot, but it doesn't say an awful lot. And Nicole couldn't find the words to truly describe what was going on for her. We didn't have a lot of time. It wasn't the best time to have a full-blown chat about it. So she sent me some social media posts, and that helped me understand, again, very, very thin veil of some of the things that she's experiencing. But that was a threshold. It was an opportunity for us to start to engage in a conversation that we haven't had up until this point, because We haven't had to have this conversation up until this point. It's been rumbling in the background for a few years. About 3 years is what Nicole says. But now we are at a phase in our relationship and in our familial relationship with our two boys, that I feel it's really important to really recognise and to support in as much as we all can. Nicole also lives in a male-dominant house. She's the only female in a male-dominant house. We have one elderly cat. She's 16, who's a female, and one male cat. We're not going to include them in the conversation, although I already have. So, yeah, that was a kind of it started a conversation. It's continuing a conversation with her and I. I spoke with some incredible females this week, lead experts in female pelvic health. We're having a conversation around the menopause, you and I right now, but it also prompted your blog around the menopause too as well.
I think because we talked about this being something that we may wish to explore. For me, that was instigated by the publishers of my book suggesting that I opened up the audience. But before we get into that, I want to take a step back, because when I read your words, obviously I read them projecting your voice, because I spend a lot of time with you and I've listened to all our podcasts multiple times as I edit out the ers and the ums. But I can hear you saying the words as I read them. What I can't do is anticipate Nicole's phrase. So when she said that phrase, was this a plea for help? Was it a dark, humorous comment? I'm not meaning that in a disingenuous or pejorative way, but I'm just interested to understand the intonation of the phrase. Or was it a cry for not help, but to be seen and to be heard?
It would be very easy to take it personally, wouldn't it? Very easy. That's me. You're saying that for me to get a rise out of me. It had nothing to do with me. It was said, I believe, and from our further conversations with us together, with Nicole and I, that it was a demonstration, a verbal demonstration of how much she was having to hold at the moment and how overwhelmed she was without having the capacity or feeling able to express or and she said this, the need to express. I don't feel I should have to tell you everything, was how the kind of conversation has rolled on since then. And I get that. She does not need to tell me every single shitty thought that goes through her head. That's quite alarming, because that also suggests that she has a lot of heavy, dark thoughts that do go through her head at certain times in her cycle that she has been dealing with more and more and more and more and more. What she said to me about not wanting to kill herself was, I'm feeling quite desperate at times, but I'm not that desperate. So I can't answer for her in that sense, but I feel it was a kind of I don't know what else to say, so I'm going to say this because it's a reflection of how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yeah, and an expression of the order of magnitude in the context of a conversation that must have preceded it. And I think what's wonderful is the conversations that have followed.
It's been really, I'm really grateful that we are able to have these conversations. I can never know what it's going to feel like to go through the menopause. You and I will never know. Mm-hmm. Another conversation. But we are living with people, we are living with wonderful people, incredible people that are going through an incredibly challenging time right now. At times it's wonderful. At times it is really creative. It's driven. I've got some lovely terms that are used across the world to describe some beautiful, I've got some horrible terms as well, but some wonderful terms that are really used to highlight an opportunity that can come from the changes that are happening within Nicole's body at the moment. I'm really humbled to be let in a little bit, to be shown actually what else is going on, and what it has allowed for her and I hope it will do moving further forwards, is that it allows us to switch our dynamic. We've been together now for quite a long time, nearly 20 years. Might be more than that. I need to check. I'll fact check that with
We'll
myself.
fact check it and put it in the show notes.
Yeah. It's a considerable length of time.
I'm sure this is not the only minefield that we're going to run across on these podcasts, my friend.
No. We got together at 29. I'm 49. 20 years. It's
Perfect.
a long time.
You got there in the end.
Yeah,
Don't ask me when I got married.
And we've been through a lot, an awful lot. And this is just another season in our lifetime together, in our experience and the time that we're going to spend together.
What I loved about what you wrote was the acknowledgement that your role in this is to step back and not to make this about you, but to afford space for it to be about someone else's transformation and transition, and to be a listener as much as anything. When I read it, it was as much about not what you said or what you did or even the interaction, but to acknowledge that you needed to afford your partner space. It's interesting how our language works. It's not even about that, but that you are able to know what your role is and afford the other person the freedom and emancipation to do whatever it is that they need to do. You can see that the language we use as we talk about this and as we write about this is difficult. When I wrote an adjacent blog as a reaction to the inquiry, how could I open up the audience to my book? So my book is written for men going through midlife, and the publisher would like it to be for a wider audience. And so that inevitably means that they wish me to make it appealing to women. And by that, I think that they meant, could it be read by women? On the one hand, that might mean that a woman might read about a male experience of midlife, and that may be helpful. It is also true that it's going to be about relationships. What it's absolutely not is about the lived experience through menopause for a female. That may be an adjacent book authored with a woman or a specialist who understands that period of life. But even in writing a blog about the opportunity that this represents, every single word is loaded with meaning. Writing the blog that I did, first of all, I didn't want to write it about managing the menopause, either from my perspective or from my partner's. I certainly was very careful when I wrote and then read phrases like how someone is struggling or coping. These are terms embroiled and entwined in a patriarchal history. And we're not always conscious of that. But when in rewriting and rereading and rewriting, I was very, very aware that, our language, and it's not, again, not a criticism of you nor me, can be laden with a legacy that has preceded it. I very much wanted that piece to be about the creativity that can happen. It's quite easy to default to sort of go, well, is it more complicated in the relationship? And that may be true. And that may be the sort of the conversations of, as I said, flippant remarks in the pub between men. Not always, but sometimes. It is definitely a complex set of experiences, both individually and collectively. It is also a celebration and an energetic period. I've seen that for Michelle and with Michelle. And so that's what I wanted to celebrate, which is to say, okay, that in this liminality, in this transformation, there are incredibly positive energies as well as complex energies to manage. I think both of us acknowledge that in what we wrote. That also creates a question about the transitions in relationships. Michelle will not be the same person today as she was yesterday, and she will not be in 10 years' time, the other side of a process that's both mental and physical. They're one thing for me. I think of mind-body as one. She will not be a former version of herself. She will have stepped over that. into something new. And that's incredibly exciting. But it brings relationship challenges with that, right?
Yeah, it really, really does. I loved your homage to Michelle. That's how I felt it. That's how I read it. It's just a deep, loving acknowledgement of where she was and how she was before and what she's going through, and celebrating all the things that she's embracing right now. There's some interesting cultural terms, ones that I like and ones that I don't like. So the turn of life, or the second spring, is a cultural term that's used in the East, that's around this time of the menopause. I love that second spring.
Absolutely.
And it's really, for me, that evokes an awful lot of what you described that you're seeing in Michelle right now, is an embracing of something different. I can see it in Nicole. I can absolutely see it. Both your wife and I, both Michelle and Nicole, are, for example, changing their relationship with things they've consumed in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol being one of them. And they're consuming life in a very different way. Nicole at the moment is studying and changing her practice. And I know Michelle is on her own journey at the moment of changing what she was doing on a career path. The second spring is gold.
It's a lovely phrase. And it is a time of generation and creation and renewal. And we can see it in both of our partners. And it's a wonderful thing. It can also be quite threatening, because we don't know, temporarily, we don't know what the outcome may be. So it can be threatening for them as they experience it. It's quite challenging. And as a I was going to say as a unit, or as a collective, as a family, it also brings questions that we don't always know the answer to. No. Some of that's exciting. Some of it.
But there's physical changes that are happening here as well, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can't speak from a female's perspective. I'd imagine that some of those are pretty frightening, they're asking some big existential questions. Nicole said to me today, for example, about embracing, she's 45, embracing the silver of her hair and really embracing the changes that she's going through. Acceptance, looking at herself, her words, looking at herself in the mirrors in the gym this morning, seeing herself as a middle-aged woman. Those were her words. And there was some sadness in what she was saying, and I get that. But what there was also was she was seeing herself. She was acknowledging herself for where she is right now. And because of all the changes that she's experiencing, I would imagine that is pretty heavy and pretty loaded, sometimes easier, and definitely, and I've seen this, sometimes very, very weighty and too much to even look at or hold or express through words, whether that be with me or her friends. And I would imagine, I hope that there's some space that she's able to, with her friends and female patients. She's a colonic hydrotherapist and nutritionist. And I catch snippets every now and again of a conversation happening as they might be saying goodbye or greeting, where Nicole's greeting a patient, about HRT treatments, about things that they're trying, things that they've read, podcasts, books, resources that are available to them. And I am so, curious, because it's a conversation that her and I and you and I are having right now. But I'm also really comforted to know that I'm not the one to fix this. That is not my role. There is nothing to fix.
Yeah, well, there you go. Another term.
Yeah.
Inferring that something is temporarily dysfunctional or broken. And that is the language of the past.
It really is.
Again, not being judgmental of you, these terms are almost natural terms, and yet there's an opportunity for us to reframe them together. It is a relationship that's changing with one's own body, whether that's for men or for women. I mean, we're talking particularly about perimenopause here and menopause, but in concert with ourselves. I think it's really that interesting point about the greying of the hair. That came to me quite early. I'm personally quite pleased I've still got some, but I kind of realise now I'm a grey-haired middle-aged man, and sometimes the view that I can see out of myself is not necessarily the one I see reflected in the mirror. And who the fuck is that? Yeah. Coming to terms with that and feeling comfortable takes experience. It takes time. So yeah, there's that self relationship, which I'm sure we can explore, and then these interactions between ourselves. I think that you reminded me. We're further through a period. Michelle is 50. I am 56. We may be late stage perimenopause or menopausal. Michelle is, and my experience of sort of being in partnership with her. I'm at, late andropause. And yet there's still so much to understand and learn about that. It may be that we are increasingly comfortable, even though we're still in a late stage of this transition. It does come with a degree of comfort, of acceptance or integration, that we're the youngest old people that we know. And that we're still vital and full of vitality. Back to your point about spring, it's still an incredibly energetic period. There's changing responsibilities. Some of those things are being reframed. But yeah, so we'll explore that aspect of relationship with self and relationship in family units. We can also explore our relationships then with things which have been responsibilities or important, and how those can be reframed. Because while we don't necessarily want to do work as an entire season, our relationships with the things that we do will also be changing. We talked, you and I, before this started, about the window of opportunity that this can also represent. It's a neurological window, quite literally. As we go through transitions, our brains are able to change. Neurologically, new pathways can open. Now, I know that there's that sort of sense that a lot of thoughts and behaviours are calcified, and that we become kind of creatures of habit and stuck in our ways. And that may be partly true, but there is also an opportunity to reframe our relationships with our feelings and our emotions. So I think there's many levels that we're going to be exploring. It begs the question, how do we bring the significant others into this conversation, Karl? What ideas may we have around that? Two guys having a chat. Where might we take this?
So in asking the question, I'm wondering if you've got something that you want to add to that as well. Is there a little seed there that's present that's prompting that question?
I guess for me, it's about whether there are learning opportunities for ourselves and for other men that could be supported by other men and potentially women. There's seemingly there's no books that are the manual for men navigating the menopause. I can pretty much guarantee that's not true. Yep. If it hasn't been written, then I'm going to write it this afternoon. But I'd imagine it has been. But I don't know what that seminal work is. I know who wrote Atomic Habits, and I know who wrote the book on sleep, and I know that I can go to Brené Brown on vulnerability, for example. But I don't know where the go-to is on the male experience of menopause. But I wonder whether we can bring in experts in menopause who will be able to reframe much of what they know for men and groups of men.
I completely agree. In speaking with Sandy Hilton, these are the two ladies, my former teachers of mine actually, Sandy Hilton and Hilary Lewin, earlier this week. They were so... They welcomed the conversation so richly and warmly to discuss and to highlight opportunities for midlife men to get involved a little bit, to be part of the process, to be part of this transition, the second spring, the turn of life. We do have a role. Sometimes that role might be walking away. Sometimes that role might be curiosity. Historically, men haven't helped the situation at all. I'm going to read you a quote in a moment from a gynecologist from the 60s. And that book would have informed an awful lot of the gynecologists who were training and studying in the 70s and 80s, who probably our wives are seeing or have seen now. Unhelpful messages, really, really unhelpful messages. I think there's an opportunity for us to shift a little bit. And I don't know the answers. I'm guessing you don't know the answers.
Absolutely
we
not.
don't know the answers. So we'd be foolish not to welcome in experts to help us and to guide us. Sandy and Hilary helped me collate some information, which I'm going to put together in a PDF. And that's a couple of points for midlife men to help to navigate what their partners, but also family members and friends and work colleagues are going through at the moment, and who best to ask. Who best to ask, rather than looking at it from a male, misogynistic, unhelpful. We've mentioned about some of the language. Even when you said managing the menopause, I was aware of the first three letters of the word managing. And it just tickled me. I like the English language, but there are definitely some times that we trip up with the English language as well.
And I don't think you and I should be afraid of that.
No.
I think that if we can take a moment to see it and to question it and to challenge it, that's a positive thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it will be helpful for us to seek, whether it's in the construct of a podcast or whether it's in our writing or whether it's in perhaps a day-long event, for us to enjoy the facilitation of expertise that's outside our own experience. I know that there are lots of, for example, within organisations, menopause talks happening, and that's very positive. I think that it will be useful that permeates the groups that you and I facilitate. So we'll look forward to that opportunity in the next 12 weeks as well. Both your blog and my own reminded me that there is an opportunity to celebrate the positives and to create space for that. The whole theme of your blog was about affording that opportunity to take a moment and to really listen. Mine was to choose to focus on the very many positives rather than some circumstantial inevitabilities of two people being in close proximity with each other as they go through states of change. I've been through one that my wife has supported temporary through recovery of an operation. I'm not suggesting that those two things are alike, but as we go through transition, sometimes it's important to step back and to actively acknowledge and celebrate the many positives. Seeing Michelle manifest the changes that she wants in her life, rather than focusing on the ones which may be less in her control. Again, that is language I'm uncomfortable with. But some are physiological inevitabilities. Others she's creating for herself. And sometimes it's nice to celebrate the success and the joy that is generating.
It's incredible empowerment. Again, another men word, isn't there? Incredible empowerment from reading about what Michelle is achieving and doing within her life right now.
Are we going to try to inject the word, a neutral word like people into... I think that might be hard.
I think it is going to be incredibly hard.
Let's close out, because this is a preface then to a season where we explore relationships and in many different ways and in many different contexts, and I think that's super exciting. On reflecting on what you wrote and also the last couple of weeks, and without it being trite and oversimplified, what clarity might you be able to offer someone listening to this? What piece of gold might we be able to say, Okay, this is extremely complicated and there's no one right way. But is there something that you can just leave for another man to pick up as a clue?
Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Because it's a really, really important thing that we must consider here. Is that everything changes all the time. Everything in the universe is in a state of impermanence. So it doesn't mean that whatever changes that you're experiencing in your partner or the females in your life is exactly how they are all of the time. They're going through an incredible change right now. And I've got to read this quote shortly. We can really lament that and say that's their issue and they're the problem, or we can try be part of something different. And I don't know what that difference is. I don't want to label it because I think then that can also have its associations and connotations as well. One of the things that Hilary said in the closing elements of the conversation that we had in the week was about how much she's loving being the other side of the menopause. So she's been through perimenopause, menopause. She's in her 50s. She's thriving. She's loving it. She's struggled through that time with relationships, with family, with work, with a sense of identity. But she's loving being where she is now. And Hilary is someone that embraces change. And it was great to hear and great to see that as well. So whatever changes are happening in those people that are around you, this is to the men, whatever changes are happening in those females around you, they're not permanent. There will be highs, there will be lows, there'll be lots of middle ground and uncertainty as well. It's not about you. It's not about you. And I would encourage you to where possible, be open to change happening. But it doesn't mean that it's always going to be negative change. It doesn't mean that it's going to be stuck in that state forever, because there are going to be challenges. But again, they're not the challenges that you're going through. They're the challenges that our incredible women folk are going through.
We're going to pick up on this, but in another episode. I am not going through the menopause because it's absolutely not my physical or mental transformation. But I am in concert with another person. I am allied to and in a relationship with. And so therefore, there is a lived experience. I see that as a learning opportunity. What I've learned from reading your blog is that it's an opportunity to stop and listen. And from the writing of my own, to stop and celebrate the incredible positivity rather than pick on an easy topic, which is a change in behaviours in the house or an increased frequency of a certain type of conversation. That would have been easy pickings. And I'm sure there's a place for those things. But it is also about us and our interactions with, I don't even want to say reaction to the menopause, but our interactions, whether it be with our sisters or our mothers or our partners or friends. The wonderful thing about the perimenopause and the menopause is it's everywhere. And that's an opportunity for men and women. You have this quote, which is a strange endpoint, so I don't know if it will be the one, but it certainly helps highlight a history that we need to allow to be rewritten, not least by women, because I'm assuming that this was written by a man.
It was written by a gynecologist, Robert Wilson was his name. The book was Feminine Forever, 1966. This created an awful lot, not just this quote, but the whole book created an awful lot of agitation. And I think understandably so, given what was suggested, I think a lot of it was unfounded. I know a lot of it was unfounded. A menopausal woman is an unstable, estrogen-starved woman who is responsible for untold misery of alcoholism, drug addiction, divorce, and broken homes. Yeah, it's pretty scathing. And that would have led to a whole educational wave of gynecologists coming through, and that premise set in very much of a misogynistic male, we know best, they are just... Do you remember what I said about hysterectomies and hysteria?
Yeah.
And that misguided and that misplaced. There's so much of the language that we've been using is just really, really unhelpful. And I can find my language in today's podcast a little bit clunky at times, because I find myself butting up some... I've gone to a dead end of something. I'm not really too sure what I should do with that or how I should navigate that more successfully.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think if nothing else, we can only be authentic and allow that to happen in this safe space. We started by talking about this global inflection point, this moment of change. This and content like we had adolescence last year. This year we seemingly have the manosphere. There is an opportunity, as the world will seemingly turn a page in the presence of robots against a backdrop of conflict, for us to ask the question, what does a better future look like for our sons and our daughters? And hope that there's more than one hand on the pen when we author statements that will supersede that one.
Mm-hmm. Let's hope so. There's a chance for change, isn't there?
I'm optimistic about that.
Yeah.
I think that the more that we can accommodate, facilitate, and appreciate these conversations and topics, the more likely it is that there's better outcomes. That's the intention of the next 12 weeks. Let's see what we learn together.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's a great opportunity to celebrate this season, springing into a new step, whatever that might bring up with relationships and exploring them.
Absolutely. I look forward to the next conversation.
We'd love to know what you guys think of the podcast and what we're talking about. Perhaps there's some things that you might wish to explore, either around the menopause as a midlife man, or perhaps as the partner of a midlife man. We'd love to know if you have any interest around relationships and where you might like to take the next 12 weeks with us, where you might like to walk with us.
How does our listener do that?
We have an email address.
Matt@theclearing.life, or leave a message on socials, direct message us, make a comment, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram particularly. It would be brilliant and helpful to know what people may wish to explore, and your own perspectives always. Thanks, Karl.
Thanks, Matt.